Am I good? Am I ready? Should I start now?
Yep.
Edge. Am I good to go?
Yep, you're good to go.
Am I audible and visible?
Yep, yes, both.
Good. Okay, I'll start my speech in three. So if I start, you guys in the chat, please. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel at Ceresco, feminist movements have been trying countlessly to gain the equality by pushing the narrative that woman can do whatever a man can do. But the thing is that the result of this hasn't been successful to the extent to actually gain equality to women in society. Rather, much people actually do not much care about this narrative because it hasn't been proven to, and just like let it go, and it doesn't have much weight in society as a whole. So in our society, we have decided to encourage sologamy for women through the feminist movement in order to attain actual equality in society. So sologamy is basically you marrying yourself, it's marrying yourself and marrying yourself in society. So moving on to my first point of substantive, the role of the feminist movement. The main problem as of right now is that the rhetoric existing that you need a man to support you in society. Therefore now is that you are actively restrained from doing various activities in society because this narrative exists, and now you are not being able to do various things because it is time that you need a man society to support you and to make sure that you and to help you do every single thing in society. Now, before I move on, I'll explain a few points on how being single and sologamy is different. When you're sologamy, there's much more weight to it. How? Because when you are sologamy and when you know that you are marrying yourself, you are timeless. You can take care of yourself because now it's time that you need to support yourself. You can take care of yourself, and you are independent when you're solo when you're married to yourself. But the difference when you're single is that you haven't been married, and how you might be still independent, but still doesn't prove that you don't need someone to support you in your life because it doesn't prove that you will be married or not in the future, right? And therefore sologamy carries much more weight to it, and that's why we are biting the bullet and promoting sologamy instead of providing non-marriage in for women, right? So moving on to what women gain when they go to sologamy, right? So basically when women go to sologamy, they create the narrative on how now they don't need the help of a man. This is now how women don't need. They prove that how they can have financial, mental, and physical support, and they could support themselves without depending on another person in the relationship in their lives, right? So now, but now we prove to the society that women can be stable on themselves without depending on a man in the society. Now, what we take out this narrative that already exists in society, which harms the progress of feminist movements in society. And so, why do we need to take this decision? Because we need to take an effective decision to gain actual equality, which hasn't been received to women in society at status quo. So therefore we support women more in our side of society as a feminist movement because we provide better equality through actually pushing encourage women to engage in sologamy rather than being not married at all. So not panel that in our side we are only encouraging women, right? So if the woman wants to actually still marry, it's fine. We are just encouraging the sologamy in order to gain equality. And sure, maybe there are good men in society, but still majority. So if women want to marry, they could still, but we are only from encouraging them to do so. So before I move on, I'll take a point.
Just to be clear on your stance of promoting sologamy, is your side willing to also support the institution of marriage with another partner?
Yeah, we are fine with institutions. We are fine with that. But this thing, we are encouraging women to engage to marry themselves rather than marrying another person in order to break this narrative. But we are fine with women marrying a man or another woman. We are fine, completely fine with that. So we encourage this to break this narrative that is causing women from not doing what they want in society. So moving on to my second point of substantive on safeguarding of women. As of right now, women have less abilities. They are restrained from society because of this narrative that exists on how women need a man to do everything, and they are not equal in abilities. Even though the previous thing of how women is equal to men existed, it is very hard to gain equality. It is less progressive when before before as a feminist movement to actually gain this equality. This is like, how long did you take to be able for women to drive in Saudi Arabia? It took a long time just to get that ability because of this we have of this less powerful narrative that we push in. But rather when we push this, when we push sologamy and we encourage this, we completely break down the other narratives so we can be more progressive as a side, on-side proposition than opposition. Moving on to how we exactly help women practically, the practical benefits of this of our side. So basically now women won't need a man because now the narrative is broken. Now women can feel now women can feel do things they want because this narrative is broken. Now women won't need a man to be free and to do what they want in their lives. And now therefore now women will be actually seen as independent individuals. They can be independent individuals because we take this narrative down, and people won't reject them for doing so. So women have more freedom to actually engage in activities that they're not allowed to, for like driving and etc., for like engaging in Saudi Arabia and whatnot, because of this. So therefore it is more likely that we gain true independence, true equality to ourselves, because we are proving to you on how we actually, how women are actually equal and how women actually can be independent on our side. So we are more like to give more freedom to women, more equal to women in our side. Yeah, I'll take your point.
You've just dedicated 5 minutes of your speech to saying why singledom is empowering while women are being oppressed within marriages. How can you possibly say that you're also okay with marriage with a partner?
See here, Sinan, you understand, we are pushing we are pushing sologamy due to the fact that the previous narrative of how women are equal to men hasn't been worked, because we haven't proved, right? We are fine with women marrying another partner because it's their right to do so, right? But the thing is that why we are encouraging women to do this is because now women don't have to be coerced by the narrative that women have to be married to another person in order to get this equality in society, or in order to do anything they want in society. They have been under the protection of a man, under financial assistance of a man, and under the mental assistance of a man in society. Rather now we prove you, we prove that now women can get sustain their own finance, and how they could be self-independent in society. That's how we win this debate. Thank you. Side proposition. I end my speech.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for that speech. Now I'd like to invite the Leader of Opposition to open the case for opposition side. Here.
Hi, just checking if I'm audible and visible.
Yes to both.
All right, thanks. So I go by he, him pronouns. I prefer POIs be given verbally, around after the first argument. Right, thank you so much. Speech starting in 3, 2, 1. Opposition concedes that marriage isn't perfect, nor is sologamy. But the debate shouldn't be about that. It should be about the side that can better solve the issues that we see in status quo, whilst maintaining the value that the feminist movement espouses for a long time. Two pieces of setup before I move into responses to the side of government's case. Firstly, what does encouragement look like under Gov? Because we don't think it's just encouraging individuals to sologamy. It's also for them to discourage them from participating in the conventional institutions of marriage in order to create the specific counter-narrative that they want to create in order to oppose the coercive nature that they identified in status quo. But it also looks like them promoting sologamy as the optimal feminist choice. If you do not opt for sologamy, you are not part of the full feminist ideal. You are not feminist enough under their side of the house. Secondly, what do we support on the side of opposition? I think we just support the general stance of the movement right now of neutrality. We do not necessarily support any specific partnership. We do not actively oppose sologamy because we view all of them as legitimate choices, as long as it's the women themselves who want to do so and who see fulfillment in it then. That means we're still able to facilitate the specific discussions regarding the experiences that women face in these relationships, but also to inform women about the benefits and downsides of every type of relationship before they opt into on our side of the house, instead of promoting specific ideology. Two responses I have towards the Gov case. Firstly, on the mechanism and framing that women are still okay with marrying under their side of the house. If they also say this, then they're kind of going in tension with the first 5 minutes of their PM speech into bashing the institution of marriages. If they think that the institution of marriage is that coercive and that women do not feel independence by marrying to another person, then they cannot also say that they still want people to actually opt into marriage in the same breath. If they say it's just encouraging people to opt into sologamy, then they do not create this counter narrative that they want to oppose the coercive nature of marriage, because the patriarchy is always able to outweigh the so-called encouragement that the feminist movement is able to give them. They have to pick a specific stance. They cannot just choose the soft line. Second response then is on you being restrained from other alternatives apart from marriage then. Firstly, I don't think you need another narrative or form of partnership in order to oppose the institution of marriage. The feminist movement right now is able to actually have individuals opt into them and be independent from the coercive nature of like historical marriages. Like people are able to actually opt into gay marriages, people are able to opt into polygamy, people are still able to self-partner without having to marry themselves then. There are a multitude of choices that the feminist movement is able to encompass and facilitate for everybody to choose from. So you do not necessarily require one specific choice in order to counteract the specific coercive nature of marriage on the side of God. Secondly then, I also think the feminist movement was never really was never meant to upheave the system at all, but more on empowering the choices that women make in them. This can be seen when Muslim women in Europe are still able to wear their hijab, even though society still believes that it's a coercive religious nature, then individuals are still able to be empowered on the outside. Thirdly then, if Gov thinks that women are that independent, their case also restricts their independence, because they only tell you that you can only seek for women in one specific marriage, one specific type of relationship, and others are no longer as fulfilling, is tantamount to the patriarchy subscribing what they think women should actually feel value in then. So against my speech, the first on why the feminist movement ought not ascribe feminist ideals to choices women can make. 3 layers. The first is that in order for the movement to properly encourage sologamy, government must defend the hard line. So for 2 reasons. The first is just the counteracting that I've already mentioned, but secondly, it also often requires downplaying the key characteristics of relationships in order to promote the benefits of sologamy, which looks like the shaming of married or taken women for bad choices or choices that actively harm the feminist movement then. Second layer on how this restricts the choices of women who want to opt into marriage. I don't think it's a complicated concept that women can derive happiness from marriage. The idea of having a partner there for you, someone you can spend your vulnerable moments with and own property with, essentially becomes one where in these times, structures that make up the aspirations of some women. Under Gov's side, these women are harmed on 2 ways. The first is just deprived of the avenues for happiness, that they cannot seek a partner, and the feminist movement tells them that it is not happy then. They will not seek out for it. They are unlikely able to get the maximum happiness they want to. But secondly, I think it's also them being misinformed when they opt into sologamy because of the downplaying on the Gov side. They're unprepared when engaging with the downsides of sologamy. When they feel lonely, they do not know who to reach out to or how they're able to sort the assets within this marriage then. Third layer to this argument is why autonomy is seen as the core essence of the feminist movement, and Opt is able to espouse it the most. Because the movement has always pivoted towards choice feminism for all of history, but the operations of the feminist movement have always been to combat an oppression of choices paramount to the patriarchy itself. The choices of women has always been taken away from their hands by parties separate from themselves, where they weren't able to vote, drink, or work. So it's seen as oppression from the patriarchy. They could not opt into life choices they would otherwise want to. That's why on side of Gov, you ascribing values is tantamount to the oppression of the feminist movement, that telling them they cannot choose into these choices they otherwise would have liked to in a relationship. That's why we're able to actually see the last few waves of feminism taking pride in wearing the hijab or opting into conservative lifestyle, even though in general people don't think it as liberating, women still seek value in it, and we ought to protect it. The second argument then on why the espousal of sologamy within the movement restricts the discussions and improvements on the institution of marriage. The premise to this is that the institution of marriage is screwed up on both sides. Problem exists that both of us can agree on, but Gov cannot guarantee that everybody opts into sologamy, so it's on how we better improve the system right now for the people who do opt into them. It looks like under the analysis of our argument 1, Gov locks out the discussions on marriage out of the movement, when in the movement the priority would be stigmatizing the marriage as an institution and demonizing it. When women no longer see the movement as a safe space to open out their spousal relationships, or it's about the opt-out of the movement, when there's a central ideology because they believe that their fulfillment is no longer protected under this ideology then. I think the second layer to this is why the abandonment on the topic of marriage is exactly the reason why the problems within them are exacerbated. Issues like marital rape or abuses and domestic violence within these marriages, all of which are left out to rot when these victims of toxic marriages do not seek out the movement for help because they internalize the encouragement of sologamy. They think that the movement isn't there for them, or victim blame their struggles by saying that I told you so then. These are the specific people who are the most important stakeholders in the debate, who seek value from other people and seek validation from a relationship with other partner, compared to the individuals who are able to actually seek fulfillment by themselves in terms of sologamy. Opposition better protect these stakeholders by ensuring that we're able to continue the discussions on these marriages and to reach out the safe spaces that women can find within sex of the movement they can subscribe to protect themselves in marriages. We're very proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank the leader of opposition for that speech. Now I'd like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for government side. Here.
Hi, can I have a few minutes to gather my thoughts?
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, can I be seen?
Yeah.
Seen and heard?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I challenge side opposition to come up here and state at least one person within the world who is sologamically married. There's no one out there who is married, even men. And that is an issue within society. That is why we as a feminist movement should encourage this. And why we support women as a whole is because even if you are single as a man, you're not penalized by society. You aren't going out there and saying, how, he's not married. No. If you are, rather than women, if you are a woman and not married, A, you're going to be penalized by that. B, you're still going to be subjected to a lot of content within society. That is why we as the feminist movement have to actively go out there and challenge society and encourage women to become sologistic. But before going on, a few key recharacterizations on what encouragement in our side actually looks like. Encouragement in our side doesn't look like us going out there and discouraging traditional marriage or promoting ideal. If you go out there and say that if you go out and encourage someone, you're going to say that, oh, don't do this. You have to take hard, like, don't do this. Rather, and if you go out there and encourage someone, for example, to, read a book, you don't go out there and say, you cannot use phones again. You cannot use phones ever again. No, you have to want to stay on books. No, you say that, go for it, read a book. The same scenario over here. It's rather where you encourage these people to actively engage in sologamy marriage because of the unpopularization of it. And secondly, understand that marriage also exists in our side as well because of the popularity of that. And also, marriage within the LGBT with marriages exist in our society as well. Difference is we're now going to encourage itself is now going to be encouraging the scope of encourage the scope and promote this women marrying sologamy. That is a side to defend it. With that said, panel, moving on to a few points of thematic rebuttal. Firstly, which side supports which side protects women? Secondly, which side better helps with the feminist movement? Before we on, yes, sir, your point.
If you're single on our side, it doesn't mean that we're going to judge you. We'll still empower your choices by supporting you. Why can't this destigmatization happen without telling other people to opt into sologamy?
Well, understand on your side, true, you got good encouragement. Wait, could you repeat that point, please? Sorry. Could you repeat that point, please?
If you're single on our side, we won't judge you. We'll still support and empower your choices. Why can't this destigmatization process happen without telling other people to opt into sologamy when they never wanted to begin with?
Because it's taboo in society. If you go out there in society, there's no one out there who is synonymous with marriage. Meaning, in your side, nothing changes. It's still going to be the same scenario where man marries a woman, or men marry men, or best case, women marry women. It's not women going out there and surviving themselves. That is why we need to promote this to society itself. Now moving on to my first thematic rebuttal on who supports women more. Firstly, what have they told you? They've told you thus far is that the only major problem they've brought to you thus far is that women are likely not going to get much more choice which is going to harm the choice for men to select marriage. Firstly, understand that is not the concept they're pushing this. Thus far, we've been pushing the stance of the fact that is the fact that even in our first speech itself, is that women don't have this choice. At least even best case, women don't know about this choice. Women do not know that you can easily sologamously manage, right? So that means this whole system of women marrying men, best case them staying single, is going to happen all over and all over again. They've also given you the idea or the fact that it would restrict your choices. Understand that that's not the case in our side as well, because women still have this choice in our side. Difference is now they're encouraged to do choices. The difference is we're now encouraging them to move choices in sologamy marriage. That's in our side. What happens in our side? We've given you active reasons on why it's more like how when you the feminist movement encourages you is going you are more likely to be protected within society itself. Protected in society itself. So we've also given we have already given proper impacts on how this would better safeguard women as a whole. Such as it would destroy the the principle and ideology that women need a man to survive within society, and the fact that and also the fact that women cannot do stuff on their own. That's it. And we move on to the second point on how which side benefits the feminist movement. They've considered this as well. Is that the feminist movement as a whole never the existence, rather they've made active choices. The problem in the system itself, we as a prop understand, is that sologamy marriage isn't promoted within society itself. Rather, your best case scenario, which in a liberal world, the most likely one promoted, is you going in an LGBTQ marriage, as you can see within the word itself. So they've considered this, and they've also considered the feminist movement as a whole have to go out there and actively say that this choice also exists. That is a burden as you as a feminist movement should and must do. And with that said, panel, what have they told you thus far? They've told you that how this would harm, how this would go against principally go against the feminist movement and whatnot. And I told you within my rebuttal itself why that's not the case. But what have we told you on our side? In our side, what we're doing is that we're directly promoting what the feminist movement stands for. It stands for choice. It stands for the fact that women could choose more, and women could choose more. And the fact is, in our side, the women get to choose more. Women now understand that they can choose more. Panel, I give you substantive rebuttals, and I've clamped up and I've successfully rebutted one of the main ideologies. The crash point by my third speaker. Please satisfy the proposition. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that speech. Now I'd like to invite Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue the case for the opposition side. Here.
All right. I'll start in 3, 2. I'll take POIs in the chat. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Condemning meaningful partnerships under the illusion of equality was nothing but the final suicide of the feminist movement. If the DPM is correct and not a single person is in a sologamous relationship right now, this feeds into our argument about why they need a massive amount of capital and a massively hardline strategy to enact all of their benefits. The first major clarification I want to make here is evaluate what types of actions the feminist movement currently actively encourages and discourages. So note, the things that they want to talk about in terms of getting them the ability to drive and actively advocate for that choice is one that increases the options available to them because it does not come at the expense of something else, which meant that the ability to drive never came at the expense of your ability to be a stay-at-home mom, which meant that under their side, they've not yet responded to the burden push we proved from first about why it needed to be one that was hardline in terms of trying to push women away from the institution of marriage, from the concept of partnerships towards one that was focused on yourself. Which meant that this choice was one that came at the expense of another choice, which is why we don't tell women right now that you have to leave certain religions, and these religions can be compatible with the concept of feminism, because your ability to have sexual liberation may also come at the expense of these relationships, but we don't push for this to be the one thing that all women must ascribe towards to have this amount of sexual liberation. Rather, the stance that we take on it right now is that you have the choice to opt in towards this as well, and you can still be considered a feminist. So if you yet to respond as to why you can only have they only have to choose between one of these two things. So you may expand the choice in terms of what the the person in a sologamous relationship may do, but you reduce the choices outside that sologamous relationship because you can't opt into a relationship that had another partner into it. So the reduction on net of choice was important. But what they needed to prove was why the very choice to enter an unmitigatable, overwhelming harm requires the movement to intervene and make them pivot away. So if you've not yet responded to any of the potential benefits of partnerships and the mitigation we provided to you from LO, which is why these benefits are still left standing and does not meet the threshold for the feminist movement to intervene and reduce this choice entirely. Therefore, I want to talk about 3 issues in this speech. First on choice, second on inclusivity, and third on discourse. First on choice, and this is where the government burden push is not only disingenuous, it's quite unrealistic because no feminist movement on the planet currently supports marriages where you're tied down to your husband and you can't do things like work or drive. Even if this was the status quo right now in terms of some relationships, you have this restrictive things placed on towards you. The feminist movement within that sphere advocates for greater equality and freedom within the marriage rather than trying to tear down the institution entirely. So they've not yet proven why there was a counterfactual we couldn't support. And that's why their shopping list of harms about relationships cannot work, because we can do the flip and prove all the harms of sologamy as well. Like first, for example, insufficient economic sustenance, because as a woman you may not have enough ability to get a job because of the discrimination you face in the workplace, or the second, more on the emotional isolation you have when you aren't able to have a partner around you or the ability to start a family the same way others have, which meant that these are also harms that can exist within sologamous relationships. Therefore, the deadlock breaker was then the ability to restrict these harms entirely. So they've never been proven that the harms of being tied down to another partner and not being able to do your own freedom is inherent towards a marriage. Rather, the harms of you being sologamous are inherent because you can never seek out someone else, because that's the narrative that the movement propagates. And therefore, the choice is immediately reduced on their side, and it's the weighing for why the choice was more important than the potential harms you get from a relationship. This was patriarchal in nature because it tells women what is valuable for you and what isn't, and therefore the counteracting narrative to fight against restrictive marriages was never one choice against the other. It was that these choices are innately valuable and you should have the ability to opt in towards them. Second issue then on strategy. So given that this was an active debate, they've not yet proven why the feminist movement on whole benefits from this. On the context, I want you to note that the debate can't be about extremely conservative states where the feminist movement has no presence, otherwise the strategy cannot manifest and no one benefits from it. But also, if the debate was about liberal states, that's also the states where we have the most social norms and most legal protections to defend women from the worst marriages, to defend women from things like domestic abuse. So your impact there is quite marginal. So therefore, the debate where it probably has the most impact then needs to also evaluate what the reaction of the other side is going to be. Given that we've proven to you what you needed to go hardline, this also incurs all the forms of harms that they talk about when these current institutions are going to push back onto you. Because the difference here is that when you want to fight back against the role of a man in a marriage under our side, it's restricting the role of the man to impose his conditions and impose upon the choices of women. But under your side, it has to be the reduction of the marriage entirely, which is why even if both sides incur some degree of backlash, ours has the ability to reduce that backlash because we are working within the institution itself. And this is not a generic backlash debate and not a negative case either, because this proves an active harm that the movement faces, placing it in a worse position than it previously was. So even if you believe here that sologamous relationships were good, the actual sologamous relationship was better on our side, because under theirs, that is when the movement has this stigma associated with them, when the individual woman has more shame put onto them because they aren't able to experience the sologamous relationship because they don't have the degree of choice anymore. Let's talk about the worst case stakeholder they identified, which is people who are stuck in restrictive relationships. We told you about why you're better able to liberate them. You don't have to go in entirety against the institution of marriage, which leads very nicely into the third argument about discourse. We explained that discourse pivots away from problems in marriage for 2 reasons. The first was that people within marriages themselves are less likely to speak up about it because they are seen as themselves as not true feminists. The movement wasn't going to advocate for them because they're not following the primary ideology that these movements ought to have. But second, it's just an obvious trade-off of political capital that if you have to focus on one, you can't do the other, or your movement will be seen as contradictory. Before that, I'll take a point if there's any, otherwise, no. And that's why we require a multifaceted strategy in fighting these forms of problems within relationships. And it was better under our side. But note also, I think even when you are in a relationship, the dependency exists on a spectrum. Some women are stay-at-home moms, but some women also work at a 9-to-5 job and can be in important positions like CEOs. And the level of freedom also differs. Some live together, some live separately. There's a spectrum of freedom that you're able to have as a person, but under the other side, you have to homogenize these things as being harmful. And that's why discourse gets worse in order to play up the structure of these things. So we get more nuanced discussions, which is the end impact is that we get far better outcomes for women when you're better be able to fight for the individual causes they face. But the second thing was about being have to have multifaceted discourse in terms of intersectionality. So this movement, this motion only covers the feminist movement. You still have other movements like the queer movement who wants to fight for the ability for you to have these forms of same-sex marriages, or other movements that advocate for interracial marriages. At the point where the feminist movement does this splits them apart from other allies they may have, but also internally from the movement, from people who currently find huge amounts of satisfaction from the relationship. This is disastrous for women and definitely a motion that we ought not to support. We are extremely proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for their speech. Now I'd like to invite the government whip to continue the case for government side. Here.
Could I take like 30 seconds to gather my thoughts?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'd prefer if POIs were verbal, and assuming that I can be seen and heard clearly, I'm going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Before moving on to my two classrooms, the first one being will Sologamy actually help women and the feminist movement, and the second one being this society's perspective on this kind of thing and the allies that was brought on side Op's last speech, a few points of rebuttal, right? They kept on pushing on the fact that these liberal states and how they are better able to protect these women from abuse, and they're better able to save these women from these restricted relationships, right? But even though sure they will be able to do this, they have to at least come in the third speech and rebut the main point that we brought out, right? Is the rhetoric that exists in today's debate, right? Is the rhetoric that exists in society, right? It's the fact that women have to be always under someone when they're in a relationship or in a marriage, right? Sure, liberals can protect them from these abusive relationships or physical abuse, but they still can't diminish this rhetoric and diminish this ideology that exists from the start of mankind, right? It's the fact that the man is on top and the woman has to be down in the bottom doing something depending on the man, right? Sure, there are things like when they bring up these whole points on LGBTQ and everything, and how apparently now you can have these marriages are now different and everything, sure, but that still doesn't take out the core idea that exists in society, right? And the idea that exists with majority of the women, and majority of women are affected by this, right? As of right now, LGBTQs are a very minority, so they don't really belong as much to the debate, but I'll still be talking about them in my second classroom, right? With that, moving on to my first one, will Sologamy actually help women and about a Sologamous relationship, right? Even if there's no one doing a Sologamous relationship as of right now, even if no one's indulging in this kind of thing, we believe that pushing this is the best way, right? Because we have to get this idea out of the way, right? Sure, you can protect them from abusive relationships. Sure, you can do stuff, stop abusive relationships with discourse. But until now, the feminist movement has been trying to lower down this, this harassment that comes to women through this ideology, right? And they still haven't been able to, stop this, right? What both sides have to concede to is the fact that at the end of the day, what the feminist movement exists is not to, help the LGBTQ movement. It's not to, help men as a whole. It's rather to, support women and support their ideologies, right? In that scenario, what we have to do is what we have to do is what's best for the women, right? And we should do what's best so that they can be empowered and they can be independent at the end of the day, right? But in that case, right, in that scenario, we see that Sologamy is the best way to go on about this, right? First of all, take encouraging at hand, right? Encouraging means giving hope, right? Encouraging means helping someone to achieve something, right? This doesn't necessarily mean you diminish and you demonize every other option that you have, right? Rather, you're doing what's best for this person, you're pushing what's best for this certain person, right? In this scenario, we see that pushing Sologamy and
encouraging women to engage in this because of because of all these external reasons that are happening. We see that this is the best way to help women at the end of the day, right? Sure, you're going to lose a few allies at the end of the day. Sure, you might actually, society might see this as something bad, but that's how even LGBTQ started, right? This feminist movement had to accept the fact that LGBTQ movements and women that are LGBTQ, they had to accept into this kind of thing, right? Similarly, we see that society will, at the end of the day, just like LGBTQ, will accept the fact that sologamy is a thing and will actually accept sologamy as a concept, right? So we see that the harassment that comes to sologamy out of that is completely gone. Then what's the issue? The only issue after that is the fact that the one that they portrayed, right? It's the fact that about these allies losing allies, and it's the fact that at the end of the day, we shouldn't be demonizing all these other options for women, and we should be considering this kind of thing, right? Considering all the other options for women, right? We see that women have this choice, right? And the feminist movement is supposed to follow this choice of these women, right? Because that's what they want at the end of the day. They're fully conscious. Women are fully conscious about what choice they take, right? But even with the choice that they take, even if they want to be by themselves, or even with a good person in their life, they're still affected by this ideology that exists at the end of the day, right? And you have to diminish this ideology, right? Not let it continue existing, right? Even if you were to consider all the other LGBTQ movements, even if you were to consider all the good people that exist, or good men that actually exist out there, you're still not diminishing this ideology, right? And we won't see it happening in the near future either, right? Which is why we're supporting this, right? What comes out of sologamy is basically how women are empowered and women are being able to stay independent, right? It doesn't matter if it's an LGBTQ relationship. It doesn't even matter if it's a man. We still believe that women should be shown as someone who can be independent, right? Women are supposed to be seen as someone who is overpowered, is not always empowered, and is powered by themselves, right? Who can financially, mentally, and physically be completely fine without being oppressed, right? This is the core reason why feminism is a thing, right? Just as this just as the LGBTQ movement stands for those types of marriages, feminism should also stand to actually empower feminists, right, who are also another oppressed community at the end of the day, right? Now moving on to the second classroom about these allies and how society is going to perceive sologamy, right? Sure, you're going to lose a few allies, but at the end of the day, these LGBTQ movements also have to accept this fact, right? Because at the end of the day, you're supposed to be following what these people want, right? Now you're probably having an issue on why it's women, right? Why not actually put this on everyone, right? Women are the ones who are mostly oppressed on this, right? Even when it's LGBTQ movements, it's still a woman who's being mostly affected by this, right? Because men are, no, your time is up as well. Men are, completely, fine with, completely fine, right? They're financially okay and they're mentally okay, right? Actually, your time is not over. I'll take the POI. Sorry, my
Women
bad.
are more independent on our side because their form of relationships are all part of the central feminist ideal. How are women able to empower their choices when your feminist ideal is them being single and not being in a relationship with anyone else?
All right. Understand the main, understand the core belief behind being in a relationship, right? Being in a relationship means that you're not individual, right? Rather, you're going to be dependent on one person, right? On your side, sure, we can have LGBTQ movements, and sure, on your side, we can have good people in relationships. Sure, women can be in relationships, but that doesn't mean a woman is independent. Rather, you're still showing that women need to be in a relationship, and women are dependent, right? Because understand the fact that exists right now is that women aren't independent, right? On your side, sure, women are powered, but then again, they're not independent, right? And they're not powered as efficiently as on our side, right? Because sologamy supports the fact that women are independent. Sologamy supports the fact that women can be powered, right? Sure, on your side that can happen, but on our side, even if it happens on your side, it still happens more effectively on our side, right? Because even if you're being in a relationship, you're still dependent on the other guy. That's the main, the other person, right? That's the main point behind being in a relationship, right? So I hope you side with side proposition. The side that actually told you why these allies and this society will actually support this sologamy, on how just as LGBTQ movements, society will have to accept into this sologamy, because at the end of the day, women need to be independent. On their next speech, they had to come out here and show why how on their side this ideology goes out. So I hope you side with side proposition. I rest my case. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the government whip for that speech. Now I'd like to invite the opposition whip to continue the case for the opposition side. Hear, hear.
All right, just to check if I'm perfectly audible.
Yep.
Nice. I'll take POIs verbally. I mean, just a quick second. Cool. Starting speech in 3, 2, one. It's not very hard to answer the challenge from DPM. Emma Watson, Alicia Keys, Lindsay Lohan, all of these people have entered relationships with themselves on their own and have adopted the narrative before the feminist movement followed with the support of Sologamy. The thing is, the greed of the site government shall be the downfall. Because if you observe their frantic scrambles to correct themselves across all three speakers, you hear a lot of cotton fluff assertions about why they can support marriage with a partner while at the same time supporting Sologamy because it is their right. But not a single second in their case is spent telling you how that encouragement would actually look like in reality. Not a single proper engagement was actually directed towards our argument on splintering within the movement, much like the feminist movement that they actually fight for. Government's case actively fights with itself from within. I want to quickly deal with the one piece of framing that's going to actively win the opposition this debate before moving on to issues. This was that whether or not the Gov can actually support marriage at the same time. Because from the Prime Minister via POIs, we've been engaging with them on their need to take the hard line within two structural reasons. Firstly, that the Gov needs to actively encourage the opt into Sologamy, which means that the ideal world that they would actually have on their side was one where everyone opted into Sologamy, because they just spent 21 minutes telling you why singledom is great, why marriage is an oppressive institution, and why you would be far less independent if you were opting into marriage compared towards opting into being single. The case shift in seconds should not go unnoticed, because even when they try to disguise their case as saying that you can find more avenues for relationships, the whole of PM and Gov Whip was dedicated to saying why you can access more choices outside of marriage rather than within it. Therefore, insofar as they're also actively trying to do things like demonize marriage, do things like discourage marriage as an option for women to opt into, because you would much rather have everyone opt into a sologamous relationship. That means to say that sologamy is viewed as the ideal feminist choice, and that this particular form of marriage is something that is inherently coercive in the way that feminism actually preaches it. But secondly, listen closely, because they intend to use sologamy as a counter narrative to restrictive marriages that, as they said, that the narrative exists in society. That means that when put in a trade-off between marriage and sologamy will always take the priority on the government. Sologamy will always be seen as the more feminist choice, because the feminist movement will always tell you to opt into sologamy instead of marriage. And therefore, there is always a prioritization of these particular relationships that they actively have to fight for. This is the exact reason as to why they cannot just come up and have their cake and eat it too. They have to take the hard line in terms of telling you why, even in the case where people did opt into marriage regardless, you would still choose to trade them off. You would still choose to sacrifice them. You would no longer view them as the ideal feminists because they did not opt into a sologamous relationship. This was the soft line that actually lost them the massive amount of engagement within the case. I think they have to suffer the consequences. In response to this, all that they have said so far is to say that it's their right to opt into marriage and therefore we support it. We agree, but that's not your mechanism to claim insofar as you don't actually prove how your narrative can actually function in society as a result. We just proved to you why this entire idea of supporting marriage is counterintuitive towards your active encouragement of sologamy. I think you need to come up with a sort of clarification or reply, but even then it's just far too late for them to clarify the model from that particular speaker. What does this mean for the case? Because for 7 minutes of the DPM, none of what they actually said was exclusive. Because for 7 minutes of the DPM, they were arguing using our model. We were the ones who could say that it's fine for you to marry. We were the ones who could say that it's fine that you would not be judged for your choices, even in the case where you're married with another partner. Because we were the ones who did not have the misconception that something is the ideal feminist choice and that something is a better choice for you to opt into compared to another. Their side could never be tolerant to marriage. They lost the stance of neutrality the moment they chose to actively encourage something. Two issues therefore that I have to deal with like following this particular stance that they have to defend. First of all, which side better upholds the feminist movement? Because Gov told you that being single is good, that you can make more choices from outside of relationships, but it also told you that you can advocate for the destigmatization of single women and people who are left unmarried past a certain age outside. We agree that the current prioritization of marriage deserves a counter-narrative. We agree that maybe marriage is the current narrative existing in society, but that doesn't mean that the counter-narrative should be marriage against sologamy. We told you why the model from the opposition was that you should be able to do whatever you want, and that neutrality was something that we would actively opt for, which is why the feminist movement on our side will still fight for the destigmatization of women who are unmarried over the age of 30, because we do not agree with the oppression of any woman who exists outside of these particular circles. But we will never never ever tell you that the one ideal choice is that you should opt into sologamy instead of marriage. The thing that we have to hear an answer from the opposition is to say why exactly is it that this particular destigmatization cannot happen without the idea that sologamy is the ideal choice for you to opt into. Insofar as we told you why any particular choice is available, insofar as we told you why you can still opt into marriage, and you would not have to face the wrath of being viewed as an unideal feminist, of being viewed as someone who is lesser in the feminist movement. I think that was the kind of model that we would actively opt into from the opposition. But what went virtually unresponded to in our case was their whole principle on autonomy and the fractionalization of social movements. The nature of the gov cannot be forgotten. They're telling you what kind of relationships you should opt into. They're telling you you will be better in this life rather than the one that we want. So the moment you ascribe a feminist value towards a said action, you immediately contradict the whole point of the feminist movement, which was to advocate for choice. Because for all of history, the operations of feminist movements have always been to combat the oppression of choices paramount to the patriarchy itself. For all of history, the choices of women have been taken away from their hands by parties separate from themselves. This narrative is tantamount towards that particular oppression, because the only thing that you're actively changing is the gender of the oppressor. But the second thing we told you about was how exactly you actively splinter the feminist movement. Before I move on towards explaining how that works, I'll take a point on this one. 3, 2, 1, no. All right. Splintering. I would note that splintering and having multiple cohesive views is a completely different thing. Because on the other side of the round, there's going to be multiple views of what it means to be a feminist across different individuals. Their difference is whether or not this myriad of opinions is going to be accepted. Because on the gov, you're going to have TERFs ostracizing transgenders from the movement. People who do not believe in prostitution ostracize prostitutes from the movement. The idea that a single true ideal feminist takes prevalence and generates much conflict within the movement actively inhibits your ability to function cohesively. On the opt, it doesn't matter whether or not you opted into prostitution, doesn't matter whether or not you're transgender, doesn't matter whether or not you opted into marriage. Because even if I have differing views on these feminist topics, the movement is united by my understanding that everyone has their reasons and everyone has their own avenues that they derive that happiness from. Insofar as we're able to prove to you these two things, that we uphold the autonomy of the feminist movement and that we uphold the ability for the feminist movement to work together and be particularly effective as a movement, I would posit that's more than enough ground for us to win the debate on already. But finally, how do you protect people better from within marriage? Because God does raise certain concerns within marriage that are correct. Maybe women face a better power asymmetry within marriage, maybe abuse happens. But the question then becomes whether or not you want to fix it from the outside or do you want to run away from it. The framing we gave to you was that people are always going to opt into marriage regardless, because they're always going to find happiness from this particular form of marriage. Insofar as we direct the discussion away from marriage and try to direct the discussion away from helping these people, I think you lose out on a major amount of people who are still going to opt into marriage, and that is something. And the feminist movement that they have is going to be a movement that left people behind. That's not something we want to stand for. Go for the opposition.
I also think the opposition went for that speech. Now I'd like to invite the opposition reply to close the case for the opposition side. Here.
I'll start in 3, 2, 1. If it wasn't already clear from their staunch refusal to ask any POIs, the more important reason the government already loses this debate was choosing to debate in a vacuum. Because note, no feminist movement alive currently defends the narrative that you ought to remain within relationships and relationships only, because the burden push was disingenuous to say that our side needed to defend the status quo where many people may be stuck within quite restrictive relationships where freedoms were limited and you did not have any autonomy as a woman. But note specifically, the rhetoric they had to defend was saying, anytime you are with a man, that is deliberating. Anytime that you are with someone else, that is imprisonment, and only if you are not alone. This is specifically the thing we told you from all three speakers that they had to do, which they had to concede because they never actually responded to the strategy by which they pushed for this, which meant they could not also co-opt the benefits of marriage for this reason, and also for the reason that their own argumentation was talking about how marriages were bad and we would rather people pivot away from them, which means this consistency in their case already loses them the round. But I just want to be very, very clear about our trade-off here. Two things. First, maybe less people on net enter sologamy on our side. That was fine, because when you get pushed into sologamy under theirs, it was one that you did not have much control over, because that was one where the feminist movement told you it was good for you without you having the accurate information to adjudicate whether that was true for yourself, because we did not push for choice feminism then. But also because this was seen as the premier lifestyle for a true feminist, you're most likely to be pushed for this. Note, the delta had to be about these people because it was people who were going to enter anyway, then it had very little impact under their side. Second, maybe more people under our side stay in imperfect relationships. Fine, we'll take this trade-off because we were better able to reform these institutions on our side or change the social discussions regarding marriage and partnerships, which was not possible on theirs because we pushed to you that this feminist movement was seen as taking a stance that was too extremist against the institution of any partnerships, which is why reform will be far more hard on theirs. That's why the example of driving in Saudi Arabia and speed wasn't analogous because you did not have that same capital to do this here. It was in fact their side that was uncharitable because they wanted to win on every single ground. There are three issues I want to talk about. First on autonomy, second on strategy, third on discourse. First, which side has better autonomy? So both sides agree choice and autonomy is important. Theirs by delinking yourself to any man, and ours on saying you have the choice to enter partnerships. How do you adjudicate this clash and why do we win? First, because the choice within the marriage was something you could more easily fight for. When things like the gender pay gap decreases, you are able to attain greater amounts of liberation and economic freedom. And in comparison, the harms of you being within a sologamous relationship are likely to never be mitigated because any form that's seen as trying to get into a benefits of a relationship are tabooed under their end. But second, we told you why the choice within a relationship is greater because relationships exist on a spectrum. Some people are able to go to work and some people stay at home, and there are many different levels of relationships, which is why you're able to get comparatively more choice then, which is why their side, it requires the choice at the expense of other choices, meant that we could not support this, and overall the feminist movement is more in line with its precedents and values under ours when we supported this degree of choice feminism. Second issue, which side has better strategy? So their claim is that we want to introduce the narrative to you that you can be sufficient without a man, not that you have to be sufficient. But this is an extremely soft line stance because from all three speakers, we told you why they needed to defend more than that. Second, then on strategy, they say LGBT movements won't splinter away because they must follow the feminist movement. That's a dangerous and elitist moral hazard because the people at the top get to unilaterally decide what is the correct value for this, which is why we told you it was harmful. But thirdly, we told you why it was bad for strategy at a point where these things are likely to get more backlash against you, and this is a precondition for any existing benefit is needing people to believe in the movement. Finally, on discourse, we explain you get less discussions regarding things like toxic relationships, like people within marriages right now, because these people feel that they cannot speak up, or even if they do, the political capital is redirected away, which means all of their benefits on getting people to have these discussions get far less under their end because you had to homogenize all partnerships as being harmful. On all three issues, rather it be autonomy, strategy of the movement, or discourse, we are proud to win this debate.
I would like to thank the opposition reply for that speech. Now I'd like to invite the government reply to close the case for the government side and close the debate as a whole. Hear.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes to both.
Okay, cool. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. First of all, I have two main points on how we want this debate. First, on how which side breaks down this actual narrative on how women are coerced toward due to them needing a man, and how we take on this narrative. Because when we encourage people that sologamy is an option that you could go towards, and sologamy is something that you could get free from this, and how you could be still married, and we prove to you on how why sologamy has more depth than actually being non-married, because this shows the people that women can be independent, financially stable, and mentally stable, and depend on themselves throughout their life. This is how we break down this narrative. We put you on how, therefore, we prove to society that women can still be stable throughout this and still move on. Their reply was that how now you will be forcing the women to do this, and like how this is the true feminist ideology. But here's the right, you have to understand that why we need to encourage this in the first place, because this is an odd decision out there in society, right? So therefore, women are less hesitant to actually go to sologamy because they are afraid, because it's an odd thing society. But when the feminist movement actually encourages this, women who actually would rather marry a man because they are supposed to, due to this narrative existing, would rather go into this, because now the feminist movement is encouraging you to actually go to sologamy, marrying another person to get your right and to be accepted in society, right? So this is what we push on our side. That we encourage women to actually go to sologamy instead of marrying a man to get your freedom in society. This is how we break down this narrative, and their main point is how, like, now on how we won't have any other choice on our side. See, we already told you that how there's still going to be, we will still support marriage. There's still going to be other options out there, but we encourage this because this is the option to actually break down this narrative that exists in society. They never provided to us actual reasoning on how they will break from this narrative, because this narrative already exists in status quo on how like so feminist movements still haven't managed to break down this narrative that exists in society to this. And they came up and said about like how in liberal countries you can protect women from being abused and whatnot. Like my third speech explained, you can stop that, but you can still break down that narrative that exists on how women needs to depend on someone else to get freedom, to be successful. And due to this narrative existing, you will never attain true equality, because you will be always known for someone who needs assistance to get equality or to be equal as men in society. Therefore, we fulfill our obligation as the feminist movement to provide better equality to women in society. And moving on to the second point on how about losing allies, right? See, you came up here and talked about how we lose allies like LGBTQ and whatnot due to this. But you would understand, right? That we support LGBT, we support LGBTQ. We took in trans women as a part of our committee. We support them too, right? It is more like that they'll support us through this because they think this is an important thing to help get equality. It's more like that they support us in the first place. And let's say in the worst case, LGBT movements and movements this is support us. But the first priority of the feminist movement is to gain equality to members of your movement rather than consider about your allies. Because in the first place, if you can't provide equality to women in the first place, that's the point of having allies in the first place. And therefore, the most priority is actually provide for your members of this committee, and we do that better than side opposition in this debate. So therefore, I have proved you why on how we break down this narrative and on how their point on losing allies is still worth it, even if we lose allies, to actually continue this to get equality for women. And how in our speech we already showed you what benefits we gain through this, because now women can actually be seen as independent and can do anything they want and have more freedom on our side. So therefore, please side proposition. I end my speech. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the government reply for that speech. So that concludes the debate. And thank you both for that wonderful debate. Now I'm just going to ask both teams to leave this breakout room and go back to the main room so that me and Vera can talk about this debate and deliberate and come to a OA, and then come back. And then we'll call you back when we're done. So thank you both.
Thank you so much for the debate.